Hi, in this video I want to show you some code that you can use to configure your camera to capture video at 60 frames per second. The code of interest here actually is the camera configuration code to bump it up to the highest possible frame rate with the highest possible pixel area. It's important to realize that this code will not actually work because in order to bring in a full camera demonstration, first of all, that won't run in the simulator, and secondly, it would be too much to have in one video presentation. So I just want to show you this code, which you can more or less copy and paste and alter so that you can get a camera session set up and working with that high frame rate of capture. So we've got a property called capture session, and of course we have imported the AV Foundation framework into our project, of course. Now, in our viewcontroller.h, we can see that property. We've also imported AV Foundation, avfoundation.h, and we have gone ahead and coded in that we are using the AV Capture file output recording delegate. Now, a lot of this code is going to be familiar to you. The first thing we want to do, we've got a button on our storyboard that is called Capture Video, and it responds with this action here. In other words, if the capture session is not already set up, we want to set capture session to self-setup capture session. So capture session is going to set up an AV capture session and then do some things with that. So we want an error, I've called it error, and then AV capture movie file output, we want to set that to nil, and then I've got my session here, which is an AV capture session that I'm going to return. I've allocated and initialized it, and then I need an audio session. I need to capture both audio and video. So I'll be adding these sessions to the audio session and a video session, both to the session. So I have an audio session, and it is the shared instance of AV audio session. And then I set the category to play and record, just passing in a nil error here, and then setting that audio session active with just again a nil error. So now the audio session is active. Now we want to add a camera to the session. So I'm adding an AV capture device, camera. It is the default device with a media type of AV media type video. And then my input, I'm calling input from camera, and it is device input with device of camera and error of that error. Now, we're trapping that error so that we can see what happened. So if we have an error here, if it's not equal to nil, then we just say camera cannot be accessed, and we log out the description of that error, and we exit with a code of 1. Now, in this code is where the dialog, the new user dialog for capturing video is going to pop up. So if the user has answered, no, I don't want to capture video, video will immediately stop. However, on subsequent uses, this error will be spit out, and then we can trap it and exit in this case. So now we want to add that input from the camera to our session. Now we call a method, which I'll go into here in a moment, called setup for highest FPS. And we pass it the camera so that that camera object gets set up for the highest possible frames per second. We also want to add the microphone input. This is the AV capture device called microphone, which is the default device with a media type of AV media type audio. Then we get the input from the microphone, which is AV device input, and it is the device input from the device microphone with an error of the error. And if we have an error, if it's not equal to nil, then again we want to log out cannot access microphone with the localized description of the error and the exit. Now I paused a little bit there. I do want to reset error equal to nil before I do this, because if we had an error before, it would exit through, but it's a good coding practice just to go ahead and reset the error object if I'm going to reuse it here as I do. Now we add the microphone to our session. Now we're going to get the movie file output, which is the AV Capture movie file output. We allocate that and init it, and then we add output to our session of that movie file output. Now we're almost done. We want to make sure that we enable video stabilization, so we get the connection, which is the movie file output's connection with media type, AV media type video, and if the connection can use video stabilization, by all means we want to do that. So we set enables video stabilization when available, yes, and pass that back as the message to connection. Finally, we return our session. Now, I mentioned earlier that we have a method, another method, called setup for highest frames per second. So we want to look at that. Setup for highest frame per second just passes in our camera, whatever we call it in the method, but I'm just calling it camera. We need to set up an AV Capture device format, best format here, and we need to make it equal to nil. AV frame rate is going to be the highest frame rate range. We make it equal to nil. And then the best pixel area, we're just setting that up as an N32_T of 0. Now, we want to get all of the formats available in the camera. So we do a for-in loop here, AV Capture device format, each format available to us in camera formats array. We get the dimensions from the format description. CM video format description get dimensions is a C function that we can call to get the dimensions of the format right out of the format description. Then that comes back as a little structure here, and we have width and height. We multiply the width and height and set our pixel area that way. Again, another format or another for-in loop checking for all of the frame rate ranges that are available in the video supported frame rate ranges right out of that format object again. We want to see if the max frame rate is greater than or equal to the highest frame rate range max frame rate. Okay? And if it is, then we want to check to see if the pixels is greater than the best pixel area. So if both of these are true, we set best format equal to format, highest frame rate range to frame rate range, and then best pixel area to our pixels area. So if that is not the case, then we did not set the best format. It's still nil at this point. So now we check and see if best format is not equal to nil. And if it's not, we try to lock the camera so that we can configure it. If we're able to lock the camera, then we set the active format of the camera to best format. We set the active video min frame rate duration and max frame rate duration. In other words, we clamp the frame rate of the camera to the highest frame rate range dot min frame duration. So now, remember, we got the highest frame rate range right here, and if it worked, then we're able to get the highest frame rate, 60 frames per second, and therefore we go ahead and clamp the min and max frame duration to 60 frames per second. Finally, we unlock the camera for configuration. Now, if we were not able to lock the camera, we just log out cannot lock device for configuration. Otherwise, if we didn't get best format, then we log out cannot achieve 60 frames per second, and we're back. So this modifies the camera object in place. Finally, there is a delegate method required of our AV Capture delegate called capture output did finish recording to output file at URL from connections with an error. And in this delegate method, you would do something with the video. You have the AV Capture file output object, you have the URL where it's located, you have the connection, and then you have an error that you can log out if something happened. So again, this code will not work in isolation. You want to use it in your own camera applications, but this code does show you how to set up and capture video at 60 frames per second. Thank you very much.